Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znekrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Bev, it's good to talk to you. Welcome to the Humane Marketing Podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.
It's good to have you here. Email marketing with empathy. I think that's your spiel, right?
Yes, very much so.
On your website, I'm going to start with something I found on your website. You say, my approach is rooted in consent, human connection, and strategies that align with your values.
hmm
Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, and I think you've kind of alluded to how you've changed your marketing over the years, but for me, it's been very similar that I think we're those of us who've been in this online business space for a while are very much have been bombarded with a lot of messaging on quote unquote the right way to market our businesses. And I know for myself, I've tried a whole bunch of strategies that I did because they quote unquote worked, but they didn't ever fully sit right with me. And I think a lot of times what we hear is a very much a one size fits all approach to marketing, but what works for one business model might not work for another business model. Similarly, you could have two businesses that are technically the same business model, and a strategy that works for one person will not work, or for one business will not work for another. So that's very much about where I kind of bring in my approach, that it's looking at, does something sit right with me? And if not, then maybe you should reevaluate it and think about like not so much does this sit right with me, but if I'm on the receiving end of this strategy, how would I feel? And if you know that it wouldn't sit right with you, probably not a good strategy to use. And then similarly, or kind of not similarly, but going back to the other one, consent, that being here in the US, we have kind of some more lax rules around privacy and consent. And technically, you can add people to your email list, whether or not they have consented. And I think many of us have been on the receiving end of receiving emails that we did not ask for. So my approach is, very much, did people ask to be added to your email list? I will not work with people who purchase the email list. That's just it's not good for a whole bunch of reasons. So it's not going to help with your emails showing up in people's inboxes if you're adding people who didn't ask to be there. So it's just kind of this weird strategy that I think some people still use, even though I really don't believe it works because we're all bombarded with emails and we don't want to receive things that we didn't sign up for.
Yeah. Yeah, it always surprises me when I'm, talking to someone like on LinkedIn, for example, and yeah, we have a good exchange in the LinkedIn messages, and then sure enough, like 2 days later, I received their newsletter.
hmm
And I'm like, well, how do I say this in a kind way? But just because we talked doesn't mean that I want to receive your newsletter. And
Exactly.
yet some people still believe that that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I actually had something similar happen where I was talking to someone and they messaged me and they said, "Oh, I'm doing this workshop. Would you like the information?" I'm like, "Sure, send it over." And they're like, "Okay, I added your email to my list." And I was like, "Excuse me, that's not what I said. I said send me the information, not add me to your email list."
Yeah.
And they also used an email that I very intentionally or an email address I very intentionally don't use to sign up for um for email lists. And so they kind of also took away my own agency over deciding like, should do I want to sign up for it? Which email address do I want to use to sign up for it? So it
Yeah.
didn't feel good. And I did
A
call the
lot of
person.
times it's well intentioned because
Yes,
they just want to, share their good work, and I'm sure they're doing good work. But
yes.
yeah, there's some kind of like rules to to respect, and consent is pretty much the first one, right?
Exactly. And you can always still invite someone, say, oh, in this situation, if you connected with someone, and I've done this where I've invited people, I've given a little, I'm like, here, if you like this conversation and you like what I share, you might be interested in receiving my newsletter. Here's what it's about, and here's the link to sign up. And I've had lots of people, I've had people say, no, thanks, I'm all set. I'm like, great. I've had other people thank me. They're like, oh, thank you so much. I just signed up. And I think
Yeah.
it feels good on both ends, even getting that no, like knowing that people had that ability to
The
decide for
option.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. We recently talked about Substack in one of my programs, and people asked me about it because they heard good things, and I shared that I really like the idea of having an, a newsletter mixed with a community, and then
Hmm.
always also the option to sign up. But you don't have to, because you can
Yeah.
read the content without having to sign up. So that combination, I think they really figured something out there, that
Hmm.
it's not everything is locked behind this email
Hmm.
wall, and it just really feels like a good platform. Are you
Yeah.
on Substack?
I am not on Substack. Not mostly because I'm so active on doing my newsletter on Kit, formerly ConvertKit, that it just felt like I would be
Yeah,
dividing my
doing too many
attention.
things. Yeah.
But I have seen people do that well, where they have both a Substack newsletter and then an email marketing software
Mm.
newsletter, because I think it is an important distinction to make that Substack is intended to be a newsletter, so it's really for things more like thought leadership. And it's fuzzy because it's not really a promotional platform. Even from doing my research on this, because I'm asked so often, Substack
Hmm.
versus Kit, that it actually goes against their terms of services to be used exclusively to
Right.
promote your products and services. It's not an email marketing software, but I
Right.
have seen people kind of use it in both ways. I've also seen people who use an email marketing software for their business and use Substack. They'll mention what it is they do, but they use it more for something that's maybe related, but not quite what they do for their business.
Yeah. I like that, the combination of both, because to me, Substack is also more community building,
Hmm.
because there's the option to comment, and then, there can be a conversation started, where on email, well, if people do hit reply, it's still one-on-one. It's still,
Yes,
so it's not community based. So
exactly.
yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so talk to us a little bit about best practices when it comes to email marketing and using empathy. And maybe you can start with the don't, or the anti-hero example of what it
Yeah.
looks like the typical funnel, of course, comes
Yes.
to
Oh
mind,
my
right?
gosh. I have such a clear example of this that happened just a few weeks ago. I was listening to someone's summit, and one of the participants had something that they were giving away, and I said, you know what, I'll sign up for their freebie. And immediately I was pulled right into this very intense sales funnel where I was getting I think in the 5 days I lasted on their list, I'd received like 7, 8 emails. I didn't count exactly, but it was some
Mm.
days I did notice I was getting 2 emails, and I just signed up. And my options at this point were to just delete them because I wasn't interested in what they were selling at that time. And if I was just to full on delete those emails, it's not good for the business owner. So when you think about email marketing, you want people to read and engage with your emails, and people not opening and just deleting your emails are one of the worst things that for a business owner, because it can impact your deliverability or the ability of your emails to show up in people's inboxes. So anyway, my options were to delete them, to really just to delete them or unsubscribe. And ultimately I went with unsubscribe because I was like, this is way too much. Now, kind of the opposite of that, the more empathy-driven version of it, and it's something that I practice and I will work with my clients to do is to give people the option, a couple things, to really set some clear expectations of here's how many emails you're going to receive from me about X thing over the however many of days, and then you'll expect to hear from me on whatever. Even if they said, oh, I email every day, at least gives me some indication. I don't know. The other thing is giving people the option to opt out of certain things. So if this person had said to me, I'm selling, over the next week, you're going to receive a number of emails about this particular offer, and here's why I think it will help you. If you don't want to receive those emails right now, but want to stay on my regular email list, my regular weekly newsletter or whatever, click here and I'll do that. And that would have felt like that would have given me some control. It would have acknowledged that just because I signed up for this free thing doesn't mean I wasn't, that it would have acknowledged that just because I signed up for this free thing didn't mean in that moment I was ready to buy the bigger thing. But it still kind of would have left the doors open for me to say, well, maybe down the line. And that's really how I approach email marketing, that just because in this moment in time you are selling something doesn't mean the person on the receiving end is a good time for them or they want to hear about it. And giving people the option to opt out of things versus just getting every single thing you send is really the way to lead with empathy. And it's leaves people on your email list feeling good. And it also helps you as the business owner, again, to make sure you're just sending the emails to people who want to hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the idea of selling in that welcoming sequence is kind of strange to me to begin
Yeah.
with. Like,
Yeah.
is right?
Yeah. It felt strange to me. And maybe this works for that person and that's why they do it, but I felt as the on the receiving end a little shell shocked, I guess. I was like, what
Yeah.
is happening?
Well, it's the typical funnel approach. It's like, oh, I
Mhm.
give you this free thing, then you want this, low cost item under $20, and then got you hooked, and then you're gonna. So
Yeah.
that's the typical way that we're taught to
Yeah.
set up a funnel, right?
Oh, yeah. And just to be
Exactly.
clear, I did this too.
Right.
Like, this is how I was taught. I was like, okay, this is what I should be doing. And for my former business, I had a jewelry business and I did this. And I didn't actually make that many sales from it, quite honestly. And it required at one point I paid for this extra technology that was just costing me more money than I was making. And then I was like, well, I can do it without paying for it. But it meant I manually had to go and update things and lead pages every week. And I was like, why am I doing this? This is such a waste of my time and money. And I'd rather just give people information, give them the option to always, here's that thing. Like I can still link to it the
Yeah.
things that they can buy. But I was like, in retrospect, I'm like, what was I doing? But I think I needed to learn those lessons
Hmm.
so that I could do what I do now so much better.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally hear you. Like all the retargeting strategies that we were learning, if they click this, then now sell them this and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. And it might work for an e-commerce site, probably still works, but for something like us, where we are actually selling trust and human connection, that is just like the opposite of what should be happening in these emails, right? It should
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
trust building and not trust, yeah, taking
Yeah.
away trust, really. That's what it does. I'm sure that's how you felt with the series of bombarding emails wanting you
Yes.
to buy. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very fast unsubscribe.
Right. You talked about engagement, right? In the
Mhm.
end, that's the ultimate goal always. And it's always like, it's this big word that we often use also on social media. in the end, like, what does that mean with an email list? You mentioned
Yeah.
opening rates, and what else?
Yeah. So I will say that you have to kind of take open rates with a grain of salt. They're not very accurate, and this is true across all email marketing softwares just because of how things like Apple has set things up, which from a marketing perspective is frustrating, but from a, consumer privacy perspective, I totally respect why they do that. So it's harder to, I wouldn't necessarily use open rates as an engagement marker unless it's in kind of context. So yeah, looking to see if people are opening your emails. First step, better step, are people clicking on your emails? And again, that can be a little tricky to track because some inbox providers will kind of use these bots to pre-click things, I think is a way to make sure that they're not spam. So sometimes click-through rates are also not very accurate. But things like replies, you can't fake it. Well, I guess you could fake a reply with AI nowadays, but chances are we're not getting too many AI replies at least this point in time. So if people are replying to your emails, that's a really great indication of engagement. Kit's added a new feature called polls. And I think different email marketing softwares have different things, but polls, it's like as it sounds, you set up a poll, you ask a question, and people have to click on an answer. But because they have to actually click and then it takes them to a page where they have to confirm, it actually is more accurate because people have to a bot's not going to be able to click it twice.
Right.
So, and I think, and obviously, if you see people purchasing things, but recognize that for, a few things that depending on how your business is set up, you're not going to be able to necessarily be able to track a click leading to a purchase. Um, or
Depending on the size of the purchase as well.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
if
Yeah,
it's a $5 purchase, yeah, then probably that came from the email. But if it's a $2,000 course, well, that lead time is much longer, right? So,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Right.
And then, it's if you don't, so just because I'll add, you don't see people necessarily replying to your emails, especially, if you're at full on asking for replies, it doesn't mean that people aren't engaging with your emails. I think people, I've had people actually over outside of my emails just kind of come up in conversation. They'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I loved your email about XYZ," or "I love reading your emails. I read every single one." And it's not like they reply to my emails and tell me that. So
Mhm.
sometimes you don't even know, which is, can be kind of the
No,
frustrating
because our subscribers are smart, right? They're savvy. They know that this email
thing.
goes out to a group of
Yes.
however many subscribers. So it almost feels a bit awkward, I think, to people to hit reply
Hmm.
to an email that they know goes out to a large group. So I think that's why people don't necessarily always engage because yeah, they'd rather tell you in person or or
Yeah.
in another
Yeah.
email or on social media or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. We can actually give a fun engagement. I don't want to call it a trick, but a thing you can try if you're feeling frustrated that you're not getting replies to your emails is asking people to reply with a specific word
Mm,
because that can really open up the door for conversations. I'm involved with a local grassroots environmental nonprofit, and I've been doing a lot of the emails, and we hadn't emailed in like a year to our group, or actually we sent an email in the fall, but it basically had been a long time. But I had this idea for reading this book called Climate Action for Busy People. So I didn't want to plan the whole thing until I knew there was going to be people who were interested. So I, used a storytelling email and I said, thinking about doing this book club to bring us all together. If you're interested, just reply with the word book club. And within 24 hours, I think I got 7 or 8 replies. And this is from a list of people who like they haven't really heard from us very much. But I think giving people something a little bit easier to do
mhm.
can be really powerful, and a great way to start a conversation with
I love
people.
that. That is, yeah, that is very smart because you otherwise you have to think about what am I gonna say
Yeah.
especially my subscribers, they're kind of like on the introverted side, and it's
Hmm.
like it takes us a good half hour to write an email. And so here it's
Yeah.
just one word and it's fast and easy, and yet it can start a conversation. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. And
definitely have
sometimes
to do
it
that.
honestly, even if you ask for a word or like give a poll, but like ask them to reply and just give them like choose A if you feel this way, B this way. Sometimes
Hmm.
you'll actually get more than just that. I've had people reply with to a poll with like A, and then they'll go on and write a longer explanation. I think
Hmm.
making it easy for people so we don't have to get bogged down in like these big introspective questions that can feel like a lot to reply to, but make it, if you make it a lot simpler for people, again, leading with empathy, recognizing how often we see something in our inbox that feels like, oh, this is really interesting. Let me think about it. And then you just forget about it. And
Yeah,
not intentionally. It's just we have
yeah,
so much going on in
exactly.
our lives.
You mentioned storytelling, so I assume that's another way to to build this genuine connection via email. So
Hmm.
not actually make it sound like email marketing,
Yeah.
which it sounds like you and me both, we kind of, learned that way. And now it's like, well, actually, we don't want to make it sound like anybody else. We just want to make it sound like ourselves, right? And
Oh,
therefore,
absolutely.
storytelling is the best technique there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I've had people say who've replied to my emails or I've had conversations with this about, and they're like, well, I love how you shared that. I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily sharing something like that. And that's fine. I think it's only sharing what you feel comfortable sharing
Yeah.
about your life. Like I share a fair amount about being a mom because it very much im impacts everything about my life because I've got two young kids. But I never show pictures of them. So for me, that's kind of that boundary I've set for myself. So I
Yeah.
feel fine sharing and I don't share private information about them. Might talk about doing a jigsaw puzzle with my 7-year-old,
Right. Yeah.
but
I
that
think
feels
that's
good.
an important, yeah, thing to state, because there was this tendency to use vulnerability as a sales technique, right? So that's
Hmm.
definitely not what we're advocating. It's like,
No.
just, yeah, share what feels comfortable sharing. And also, it still has to be somehow related to, the rest of your email, probably the rest of your, yeah, just who you are, but not all of a sudden bring up like childhood trauma if it's not at
Hmm.
all related, because you can overwhelm people with too much
Hmm.
vulnerability,
Yeah,
and you don't want that either.
exactly. Yeah. And I think it's okay, to be vulnerable, but again, like what feels right to you, and maybe also giving people kind of a heads up if you feel like you're going to be sharing something that could be
Yeah, that could
very
be
emotionally triggering for someone.
right. Yeah, yeah. So in a way, it sounds like we need to find this balance between automation, because that's
Mhm.
clearly what we're doing. We're using a tool to automate, and yet adding this personal touch to our emails and
Yeah.
to the way we communicate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'd argue, kind of going back to what I said earlier, that that automation piece, so kind of meeting people where they're at, acknowledging now might not be the right time for you. Right now, you might not want to receive these emails about this promotion. At the end of December, I decided to keep going with my newsletter, but I gave people the option to stop hearing from me during that holiday period and resume receiving my newsletter in January. I give people the option to opt out of my welcome sequence. So this is kind of how I'm using automation
Hmm.
as a tool to meet people where they're at
Hmm.
instead of so almost giving them more agency to hear less instead of hearing more from me.
Yeah.
Or, but similarly, if they are also giving people the option to express interest in things and using automation as a tool that way as well.
Yeah. I like that. Um, The other thing that I liked when I was talking to Ellie Trier, she's she's on the spectrum, so she's neurodivergent, And she shared something that really resonated with me. And it has to do with the email personalization, how we
Hmm.
have this tool that lets you use the first name.
Hmm.
And she was like, I don't understand how neuronormal people think that's normal, that I'm just addressing you as Dear Sarah or Dear Bev,
Hmm.
where I know for a fact that this email goes out to a lot of people. So to her, that just always feels really strange
Hmm.
to kind of trick her that, oh, it feels like we're just talking the two of us. And it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So some of my emails, I just started saying, dear ones, or like
Hmm.
addressing the fact that that I know that it's going out to the community, and not just one on one.
Yeah.
And just like thought that fascinating. It's like, yeah, we just all bought into this idea that we use these email personalizations, but to her, that was like really bizarre. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah,
That
I
is
can
such
see
an
that.
interesting point. I wouldn't have, I mean, I hear the acknowledgement of, it feels weird when you get that, it's not addressed to you personally, or rather, it is addressed to you, but it goes out to a bunch of people. But from that other perspective, just how weird that is.
Hmm.
And so I'm glad you brought that up. And also, you think about sometimes people make errors when they're putting their name in. So maybe they're like they misspell their own name or they accidentally write it in all caps and then it looks like you're
Yeah,
shouting their name like
horrible.
dear
Or your
dear
last name
Sarah.
instead of that. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I could definitely see the argument for just taking out that personalization feature
Right.
altogether and do like you said,
Yeah.
dear ones or dear friend or whatever fits with
Yeah. Yeah.
what you
Talking
do.
about mistakes, what other mistakes do people commonly make with these tools?
Oh, well, actually, speaking of the personalization feature, sometimes for whatever reason, people don't have their names inputted into when you sign up for someone's email list. So it'll say, you'll get emails that say, Dear space, comma. So clearly there's intended to be a name there, but because there's no name field, it just shows up as this
Hmm.
space. So I've been on the receiving end of that, and I just find it very it makes me chuckle a little bit
Mm,
because I know I've done that too.
right.
Um, Forgetting to update the subject line, which we've all done. So
Mm,
send an email and it goes, new broadcast. That's the subject line.
right.
Or were you meant to update whatever your email marketing software uses to pull in the name and it says so then you get an email that says dear in like brackets first name goes here.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I and these things I always like those I'm just like, oh, they made a tech error. I know I make tech errors. So
Yeah, those
it's
are actually very forgivable, right?
oh my
It's
gosh,
more
yeah.
the strategy ones where, yeah, like there's the example you shared first. It's like the overwhelm and the manipulation. Those are the bigger mistakes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
often it's not their fault. It's just that they're following the wrong marketing person. They should follow you instead.
Yeah. And this is why I always recommend, and this actually goes into is what we'll be talking about in the workshop, is that I always recommend signing up for your own newsletter, freebie, lead magnet, whatever you want to call it. I actually personally do not like the word lead magnet because I think it dehumanizes this process.
Yeah,
I don't
same
like to
here.
think of people on my email list as leads and
Mm,
I'm magnetizing them on like they're
yeah,
people.
don't like it.
Yeah, actually, I don't like a lot of marketing jargon. But I always recommend signing up for your opt-ins, your freebies, and seeing what it's like. Because I think we there's so many moving parts that go into it that I think when you're done, you're like just so relieved. You're like, "Ooh, I got that thing out there." But it's so important to test it out as someone going through that process who doesn't know you yet and seeing what happens. Because here's where you'll uncover some errors you made, or you might realize like, oh shoot, someone signs up for my thing and then immediately somehow I messed it up and now they got like three emails all at once, or I got three
Mm.
emails all at once. So that's why it's really important to really
Yeah.
take the time to check it all out.
And probably not just once, but like once a year, because
Yeah.
and I think that'll be the benefit of going through your workshop for all of us going back to, yeah, signing up to our sequence again. I, yeah, I have to say, I think probably last time I checked was last year to just go through all my emails again because
Yeah.
I don't just have, seven, I have a whole bunch because then I added some other ones and but yeah, some of the stuff's probably outdated or links don't work. So yeah, you want
Oh,
to
yeah.
check them regularly. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I really need to clean up the back end of mine so bad. It's kind of a tedious process, but I think if I were to do it all over again, I'd probably just like make it a lot simpler. At one point, I tried to make it super complex, and I was like, this is my selling point, is I can make these really complex automations. And I'm like, no, people want something simple and
Mm.
straightforward. And I'm honestly of the opinion the simpler you can make it, the better.
Yeah,
Some of these email marketing softwares can let you do really fancy things with them. But then the fancier and more complicated you make it, the more likely it is for something to get messed up or to break if you add something new in or take something away.
I agree. It just needs to be simple, unless again you're running an e-commerce site or something like that. But
Yeah.
a lot of I don't know about your clients, but a lot of listeners and my clients are coaches, consultants, and they just want something that works, but it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be this complicated funnel, and it shouldn't feel like a funnel anyway. It should just
Yeah,
feel like a trust building sequence.
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, the term funnel, another one of those words. I'm like, why? I just
Yeah.
can't. When I think of it, I just end up imagining like cattle like going down the slaughter, like they're just being fed in this one
Yeah.
direction, and you're like,
It's
"Ugh."
horrible. Yeah, it
Yeah,
really is horrible. Yeah. Tell us more about the workshop that we have coming up on April 2nd.
yeah. So it's based on what I call the Align framework. So Align is an acronym, and it's really about the process that to look through when someone new signs up for your email list. So the first step is affirm consent. So we right off the bat, we're starting with consent. And so we're looking at things like, do you link to your privacy statement? It's amazing to me how many people don't have a privacy statement, which I imagine in Europe you're probably required. I think even in the US you're supposed to have one.
Mhm.
Um, or at least certain states require it. So link into your privacy statement. If you're giving away a freebie, giving people the option to receive that freebie without being added to your email list. And this is particularly important if and I'll put this little disclaimer out there that I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice. But, with GDPR, you have to be extra careful with that. And that from my understanding of it, people have to be able to receive that freebie, without being added to your email list.
Mhm.
And then, so that's, thinking through these steps. And what's nice about this framework is it's tech agnostic. It's things that we should all be doing, regardless of which email marketing software we use. And then from there, oh my gosh, I'm realizing I like forgotten what the actual acronym stands for, but I'll just like go through the process because I think that's easier. That we're looking at things like, oh, the second one is learn from questions. So your opt-in form can be a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about the people coming onto your email list, and not in a creepy stalkerish way, but really about thinking about it through that lens of empathy and how to make sure you're giving people the information that they actually need. So for example, I ask when people sign up for my email list, which email marketing software do you use? And if people say nothing, I actually send them a different welcome sequence, because a lot of what I talk about is not going to, it's going to be kind of a little too high level.
Mm.
So it kind of helps them think through, for example, do you actually need a newsletter for your
Mm.
business?
Mhm.
That one I actually invite people to reply. And I'm realizing as I'm talking this through, I'm like, I don't think anyone's replied to that email. So maybe it's time to revisit that welcome sequence.
Right. And just ask a question with a one-word answer. I'm sure that
Yeah.
will
Yes,
work better.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 And then the other steps are thinking through, what what expectations are you setting for people? So, if someone signs up for your email list, making sure that they know what to do next. Like they should, inviting people or recommending that people go to their inbox and check for this email and telling them, what is the subject line of that email, and also
Mm.
thanking them. And then in that first email, really setting some expectations, like you're going to receive this many emails from me over this many days, or I send an email out like at this frequency. So you want people to know right off the bat, especially if you do have some sort of nurturing welcome sequence when people first sign up, that's at a more frequent cadence than what you normally send.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're marketing to consumers, they don't know how this all works necessarily. And if you sign up for someone's email list and you're suddenly getting an email a day and you're like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. But if people know right off the bat, you'll get an email a day, and then from after that, you'll hear from me about once a week. It's
Yeah.
in recognizing people, meeting people with empathy.
Transparency, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
Hmm.
all about how can we be as transparent as possible through this process? Because I think a lot of times in marketing, we've almost been taught with this whole like system is that you don't want to be transparent,
Hmm.
which,
Yeah,
but
you
I'm
want to
like,
be sneaky, you know?
yeah, which is
Yeah.
like, why, if you need to be sneaky to sell something, I feel like that should send us be sending off some little warning signals there. Like,
Yeah.
I
And
don't,
it can attract the right clients, right?
yeah.
If from the get-go they buy into something sneaky, that yeah, it just can't be a good thing. No.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the last step is nurturing. So I do recommend that most people have some sort of welcome sequence. I think there are some instances where it does, you might not. And this is again where it goes into, recognizing that there is no one size fits all approach to any of this. So even though for most people I'm going to recommend you should have some sort of welcome sequence, if you are, for example, marketing to like presidents of corporations or like high, C what we call in the US C-suite executives, a welcome sequence would probably be a little odd. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to them.
Right.
But for the vast majority of us, I think it can be beneficial to have
Mm.
something to at least welcome people into your space.
Yeah. Amazing. I can't wait for yeah, rolling back our sleeves and actually getting to work and having you guide
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, that workshop is on April 2nd. And if you want to sign up and join us in the Humane Marketing Circle, that's at humane.marketing/workshop. We just ask for a little donation to join us in the community. And yeah, Bev will be there with us live. So exciting. Why
Yeah.
don't you share also, Bev, where people can find you if they want to find out more about your work and maybe see you walk your talk by signing up to your
Yeah.
freebie?
Yeah,
Just
so the
share.
best way I recommend is to go to yourpersonaltechfairy.com/newsletter. And there's where I talk a little bit more about my approach to email marketing. And you can see what I just talked about, how you can sign up for my email list. And there's going to be that question I just I just mentioned. So, and you can kind of see how it plays out depending on what you choose. Because I will say that, if you choose Kit versus a different email marketing software versus nothing, you actually get slightly different emails sent to your inbox.
Experience. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I look forward to our collaboration and
Likewise.
thanks so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.